This is your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. We've got a lot to cover today.
A landmark ruling for LGBTQ rights started right here in Metro Detroit. We have more.
Metro Detroiter is being imprisoned by the Russian government.
The Columbus statue in downtown Detroit is being removed after more than a century. And Greektown may be getting a new development. But first, a reminder that Daily Detroit is people-powered. The economic impact of coronavirus has decimated real news, large and small. We lean on you, our listeners, to make sure we keep you connected to what's happening in Metro Detroit. Because look, let's be honest, social media algorithms are terrible at bringing you the news and the context you need to understand what's happening around here. They're there to keep you on their site, not inform you and make your day better. So consider supporting us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And as a thank you, get a sticker. And of course, we will read your name on the air.
Yeah, and plus, Jared, we come straight to your ear holes. We're not trying to keep you on our site or anything. I mean, hell, you can listen to us while you're mowing the lawn, taking a walk, riding your bicycle, whatever.
I mean, I know people who listen to us in the shower every day, Sven.
Will wonders never cease. Jared, let's do this show.
After 6 years presenting as a man, Amy Stevens was fired from R.G. and G.R. Harris Funeral Home in Garden City back in 2013. The reason? She sent a letter to her boss saying that she planned to begin dressing as a woman at work. After her termination, she brought a lawsuit under the Civil Rights Act that 7 years later has resulted in a Supreme Court ruling that has changed the nation. As we've talked about on this podcast a couple of times, Michigan has been one of the majority of U.S. states that allowed discrimination in the workplace of gay, transgender, and other sexual orientations. Basically, in Michigan, you could legally be fired for being gay. In a 6-3 decision written by Justice Neil Gorsuch, the Supreme Court ruled Monday that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 also protects employees from being fired based on their sexual or gender orientation.
Writing for the majority, which also included fellow conservative Chief Justice John Roberts, Gorsuch wrote, quote, "An employer who fires an individual for being homosexual or transgender fires that person for traits or actions it would not have questioned in members of a different sex. Sex plays a necessary and undisguisable role in the decision, exactly what the law forbids," end quote. Amy Stevens died last month at the age of 59 and will not be able to celebrate the victory. The cause of her death was not disclosed.
It's important to note that Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel issued a statement afterward that the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act in Michigan covers a wide variety of topics, including employment, and it's not amended due to this decision. The parts about employment discrimination are now clear, but Michigan law still leaves open discrimination of the LGBTQ community around housing, education, public accommodations, among a number of other issues, and statewide protections still, and this is her quote, are a work in progress, unquote. I mean, this is a huge win for LGBTQ protections across the country. It also came as a surprise to a lot of people, but I'll say for me, because I was following Neil's confirmation back in 2017, this isn't all that surprising. I mean, during his hearing, he said, and I quote this, and I thought this was interesting, and it stuck in my brain. When it comes to equal protection of the laws, for example, it matters not the sum of the drafters of the 14th Amendment were racists because they were, or sexist because they were. The law they drafted promises equal protection of the law to all persons, which is really interesting to me. I know a lot of people that I know on the libertarian side of the fence think that Gorsuch is the most libertarian justice on the court, and this kind of shows that.
Yeah, otherwise known as a very conservative, stalwart conservative justice, though.
For sure, for sure. And Michigan was one of 21 states that allowed this kind of discrimination. A number of the people on the right, especially evangelicals, were disappointed with this decision, and Gorsuch and Roberts. It's something where I think a lot of people kind of put partisan hopes on the court so much. I mean, people come out to vote just for who are they going to select on the court.
And Jared, sort of related, I don't know if you saw over the weekend the videos, like, look like drone footage from the black transgender right protest. I can't remember if it was in New York or Washington, D.C., but huge. I mean, just an absolutely, like, unbelievably large rally, very crowded together. I mean, that was one of the first things I saw was like, oh my God, look at all those people, thousands, tens of thousands of people crammed in together outside, but in very close quarters. But, clearly these kinds of issues, and this is coming again, just a few years, 5 years or something after the Supreme Court, struck down the bans on same-sex marriage. So, pivotal moments in the civil rights for gay and transgender people now, for sure. A Michigan man who has been in custody in Russia since late 2018 has been sentenced to 16 years in maximum security prison camp on spying charges. The Moscow City Court announced the conviction of Paul Whelan for espionage on Monday. Whelan is a Novi resident who worked in global security for Auburn Hills-based auto supplier Borg Warner. He's also a former classmate of mine at Ann Arbor Huron High School.
Small world, Sven. Whelan was arrested in December of 2018 while visiting Russia at a hotel after Federal Security Service agents allegedly found a USB drive with classified information in his room. Whelan has professed his innocence, saying the device was planted in his room. The arrest triggered widespread condemnation from American officials. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called his treatment by Russian authorities appalling, while both of Michigan's U.S. senators and 8 members of its congressional delegation issued a statement saying Russia has never produced any credible evidence in the case and pledging to work with his family on his release. Whelan underwent emergency surgery last month for a hernia.
So, Jared, I mentioned I went to high school with Paul Whelan and his brother. I didn't know them well, though I played soccer with both of them way back in middle school. Their father was our team coach. I've talked about this before on this show. I was worried, frankly, that something like this was going to happen. I mean, and frankly, this makes it sound like Russia really hasn't moved very far beyond its kind of dubious Soviet Union past, when people used to disappear to gulags and work camps for the rest of their life and never be seen or heard from again. This is terrible. There are apparently rumors that Whelan has been set up, to become a political prisoner that Russia wants to use kind of as leverage to get some of their own people who have been incarcerated here in the United States released in kind of a swap. His family apparently plans to appeal the ruling, which must be filed within 10 days of this conviction ruling, according to the Detroit News. But this is not, good news at all. My thoughts and prayers go out to the Whelan family, and I can't even imagine what they must be going through right now.
New data from the state shows both an encouraging trend and an important detail about the spread of the coronavirus in Michigan. First, the good news. While the state's total confirmed case number has exceeded 60,000, there were just 74 new cases reported in Monday's numbers and 2 fatalities. Michigan and Metro Detroit was hit especially hard by COVID-19, and it's good to see Michigan hold steady as other states across the country are seeing massive spikes in new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths after the Memorial Day holiday. For a snapshot, Reuters reports that Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Florida, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and South Carolina all had record numbers of new cases in the past few days, and Louisiana is trending up as well. Second, we have a clearer picture of just how much COVID-19 was a scourge of nursing homes in our state. More than a third of coronavirus deaths, nearly 2,000, were among residents in nursing homes, with 20 staff members falling victim as well. The new information is from what officials are calling an extensive data validation effort by the state's Department of Health and Human Services. There now will be required testing for all nursing home residents and employees across the state. Any facility that gets a positive test must then test all previously negative residents and staff weekly until 14 days after the last new positive result. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan has ordered the removal of a bust of Christoper Columbus that has stood downtown for 110 years. HistoricDetroit.org says that it was originally located on Washington Boulevard and Park Avenue, at the other end of a boulevard bookended by another controversial figure and slaveholder, General Alexander Macomb. By the way, that's who Macomb County is named after. Anyway, for years, the Columbus bust has stood steps from City Hall, visible as you come to the country from the tunnel to Canada. Duggan has ordered the statue removed and placed into storage while the city decides what to do with it going forward.
The move is controversial in some circles. Some ethnic Italians look at Columbus as a hero, and many Americans still believe that Columbus was a benevolent leader, as was taught in many public schools, of course. But historians have revealed that Columbus treated native populations terribly, including enslavement, regular floggings and beatings if the native slaves didn't bring enough gold each day from the mines. He also committed the mass genocide of the Arawak people in the Caribbean islands, among other atrocities. Columbus also wasn't the first European to set foot in America. It's now known that the Vikings, if not others after them, beat him to the New World. The Columbus bust in Detroit has been vandalized several times, including a hatchet that was stuck into its head in 2015. Ouch.
Yeah, that was quite the visual back in the day. I mean, so here's the thing about Columbus, the Columbus statue, and I'm going to go to a bigger point here. As somebody who has lived near downtown Detroit, worked in downtown Detroit, why aren't there more statues of people of color? I mean, you look around that place, there is almost nothing like that in a city that is, 90% people of color. I mean, between African Americans, Hispanics, things like that. I mean, white folks are only like 10% of the population here.
Right.
It just blows my mind that there is almost no statuary to commemorate that. And there's so much great African American history that we're just not celebrating downtown.
It's high time that we, start devoting some sculptures and probably take some other ones down. I frankly I was not even aware that we had a Christoper Columbus statue in the city of Detroit. I'm glad to hear it's coming down. The mention of the Alexander Macomb statue reminds me there was a great tweet that we shared internally a few days ago about how many counties in Michigan, as it turns out, are named for members of Andrew Jackson's administration, his cabinet, essentially. And that was like apparently a deliberate bid because Michigan at the time was pursuing statehood. And so it was kind of like, like they were throwing the Jackson administration a bone in its efforts to win, favor for becoming officially a state, which is really interesting. Van Buren County and Branch County and a whole bunch of other ones. I think Livingston is about the closest one to us here in the Detroit area, but really fascinating, almost like a dozen counties that have names of members of Andrew Jackson's cabinet.
There's a number of Detroit streets that are tied to slaveholders as well, and that's been covered a few different times. I will say this, though. I know that there are a bunch of placemakers who listen to this show. So why don't you guys get on that? Like, why don't you do that? You're placemakers. Why don't you placemake some things that actually have, statuary and things that reflect our population? Just a thought and a challenge. In a story sent to me by Twitter follower Stina Lay, a surface lot in downtown Detroit may be turned into a residential development. The Detroit News and a number of outlets report that a 16-story condo project called The Exchange is coming to the triangle lot of Gratiot, Brush, and Macomb. The 16-story, $64 million plus project would have more than 150 apartments and 12 condos and sit on a half an acre of land. The developer, Gratiot Acquisition Partners, is looking for $2.8 million in brownfield tax credits, and that hearing is in about a week. Media reports say the developer is associated with Lift Build, and that is a Barton Mallow company. Of course, Barton Mallow is one of the larger construction companies in the area. The project would be complete by January of 2022 if all gets the green light.
Well, first of all, Jared, I just say that it's refreshing to hear this kind of like good news. I mean, we'll see if this happens and gets all the way through to actual construction and everything. There's a long way to go, obviously, as we well know. But it is nevertheless good to hear about somebody planning to splash some cash and actually do something here during this horrible economic time that we're experiencing. think it's also really good for Greektown because Greektown is right now, there are just way too, like much of downtown Detroit, there are way too many surface parking lots. There's way too much real estate that is wasted and devoted to daytime or nighttime event parking that really has killed off the kind of fabric of that neighborhood. I mean, you remember New Hellas, of course, right?
Oh, of course.
On the corner, which today is just a surface parking lot. I mean, they destroyed one of the anchor restaurant institutions in Greektown and on Monroe Street and turned it into a surface parking lot. Same with the Lycon cafes. Now, they demolished that so that they could build a pedestrian tube from the parking garage into the casino. I mean, we've killed what made Greektown so good over the years and drained the life out of it. So glad to see some being added back in.
Oh, for sure. I was talking to someone over the weekend and they were kind of blown away that if you wanted to make downtown Detroit like much more dense, more like a Chicago or something like that, you basically would have to move everybody who lives in Sterling Heights or Livonia into the 7.2 of downtown Detroit. So when we talk about density, we don't even really know what that is around here. And I mean, I just think it'd be so much better for the streetscape and everything when you've got residents down there, got people circulating. Greektown's got some great old buildings and just a lot of like cultural history and affinity. And if we can kind of build on that and do more than just a casino, I think that's a positive.
And that'll do it for today's episode. Thanks as always for listening. And if you want to support our show, just a quick reminder that you can do that by becoming a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit because it really makes a huge difference and it helps us continue to push Detroit's conversation forward. With that, I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other and we'll get through this together. Talk with you tomorrow.